The storm that night was no ordinary one. Lightning split the sky over the empty California highway, thunder rattled the air, and the rain came down in torrents, blurring the world into gray streaks. A sleek black Mercedes sat motionless on the roadside, hazard lights blinking weakly. Inside it, 23-year-old Isabella Grant, only daughter of billionaire tycoon Walter Grant, sat gripping her steering wheel, trying not to cry. Her phone had died hours ago. There was no signal anyway. Her car battery was drained, and not a single vehicle had passed in nearly 40 minutes. But that wasn't the worst part. For the first time in her life, she was truly, completely alone. No assistants. No chauffeurs. No security team. No father. Just Isabella and the cold realization that money couldn't help her here. It hadn't been her plan to run off without telling anyone. But the house, the silence, the constant fighting between her father and stepmother, it had all become unbearable after the accident. Her mother had died a year ago, car crash. Her little sister, Elise, had survived, but she hadn't spoken since. At only 8 years old, Elise would scream in her sleep and cling to Isabella whenever Walter came close. The once kind father had become distant and angry, pouring his grief into controlling everything. Isabella had been her sister's only anchor, but she was breaking under the pressure. So she'd left. She needed to think. To breathe. To feel like herself again, even if just for one night. But now, sitting in the freezing car, soaked to the bone, she realized the world outside her gated mansion was far less forgiving. Her head jerked up as a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. For a moment, she feared the worst, her father's men, come to drag her home. But the truck that pulled up beside her was nothing like the luxury vehicles she was used to. It was an old, dented Ford pickup, its paint peeling, with one flickering headlight. The driver's door creaked open, and a tall man stepped out, pulling up a hood against the rain. He approached her window cautiously, flashlight in hand. "Need help?" She blinked. That voice, it felt oddly familiar. He stepped closer, and the flashlight revealed his face. Strong jawline, deep-set eyes, a scar across one brow. Then it hit her. "Jake," she whispered. He peered through the glass. "Isabella?" Jake Carter. The quiet boy from high school. The one everyone ignored. The one she used to smile at in the hallway when no one else would. The janitor's son. The boy who fixed cars after school to help his dad buy medicine. The one she hadn't seen in 6 years. Fate had brought him back when she least expected it. Without hesitation, Jake helped her out of the car and into his truck. She resisted at first, pride didn't die easily, but the storm was worsening, and warmth was more important than ego now. As they drove through winding roads to a modest auto shop behind a rundown diner, Isabella felt both comforted and exposed. Her designer clothes were soaked. Her makeup had run. Her life, always so polished, was unraveling in front of the last person she'd ever expect to see again. Jake handed her a towel and lit a space heater in the corner. "This place isn't much," he said softly, "but it's safe." Isabella stared at him. Time had changed him, broad shoulders, tired eyes, grease-stained hands, but his kindness was still there. Quiet. Unassuming. Steady. He got to work on her car as she sat beside the heater, shivering and watching him. It turned out the alternator had failed, and the battery had drained. Jake worked quickly, skillfully, never once asking who she was now or how much money she had. To him, she was just a stranded girl who needed help. When morning came, the rain had stopped. Her car was fixed. Jake offered her coffee and a ride if she needed it. No questions. No conditions. But something inside Isabella shifted. She didn't want to leave just yet. She stayed. She learned Jake lived with his 5-year-old daughter, Sophie. Her mother, Jake's high school sweetheart, had passed away from cancer 2 years ago. Jake had taken over his late father's auto shop, raising Sophie alone. Money was tight. Time was tighter. But there was love in that little house behind the garage, genuine, quiet love. Isabella played with Sophie while Jake worked. Days turned into a week. Jake never once asked about her billionaire background, though he clearly recognized the name. He didn't care. In his world, character mattered more than wealth. And in those quiet, peaceful moments, helping Sophie draw pictures, cooking simple meals, watching the stars from the porch, Isabella found something she hadn't felt in years. But her past couldn't be avoided forever. One morning, she woke to find Jake pacing with his phone in hand. Walter Grant had found her. Security footage from a gas station had been traced. The media was swirling with rumors. Jake didn't ask her to leave, but the look in his eyes said he thought she would. Instead, Isabella took a deep breath, called her father, and said something she never thought she'd say. "I'm not coming back. Not until things change." Walter roared. Threatened. Begged. But Isabella stood her ground. She had found kindness in a mechanic's garage that her billion-dollar mansion could never give her. And more importantly, she had found herself. It wasn't easy. Walter sent lawyers. Tried to cut her off financially. But Isabella didn't care. She took a job at the diner next door to Jake's garage, wore an apron, waited tables, and earned her own money for the first time in her life. She also convinced Jake to expand his garage's reach online. With her background in marketing and business, they slowly turned the small-town shop into a community hub. Repairs were offered on a sliding scale. Veterans, single parents, and struggling families were served first. Donations came in. Locals rallied behind them. They called it Carter Kindness Garage. Months passed. One evening, as Isabella was walking Sophie home from the park, she heard a scream. It was Elise. Her little sister, Elise, running toward her across the field, arms outstretched, tears flowing. Behind her, their stepmother sobbed, barely able to keep up. Walter had finally relented. The silence in his house had grown deafening. The emptiness unbearable. Seeing the transformation in Isabella from the news coverage and viral social media stories about Carter Kindness Garage, he'd begun to question everything. He brought Elise to her. And Isabella welcomed them with open arms. That night, Elise spoke her first words in a year. "I missed you, Bella." Jake watched from the porch, tears in his eyes. Isabella turned to him, smiling through her own tears. She had built a life. A real one. With love. With pain. With healing. Years later, Isabella and Jake married in the very garage where they'd reunited. The diner hosted the reception. Sophie was the flower girl. Elise gave a speech. Walter stood at the back, quietly proud, and finally, truly present. Isabella Grant didn't return to the mansion. Instead, she stayed in the town where love had found her. The billionaire's daughter, once stranded on the road, had been saved not by her wealth, but by a poor mechanic from her past, whose quiet heart changed her forever. And together, they taught the world a lesson it desperately needed to hear. Kindness doesn't need a fortune to be powerful. It only needs a heart willing to act.